Well, let's just bring you more details on that letter that has been sent by Donald Trump and his legal team to the BBC. We've managed to obtain a copy of the letter from our sister station, NBC News. We can show you the letter and I can bring you some of the key parts in it. They say that this letter demands that the BBC immediately retracts the false, defamatory, disparaging and inflammatory statements made about President Trump. It goes on to detail how that Panorama documentary was edited and his words, which were in fact almost an hour apart, were edited together. It says, due to the salacious nature, the fabricated statements that were aired by the BBC have been widely disseminated throughout various digital mediums, which have reached tens of millions of people worldwide. Consequently, the BBC has caused President Trump to suffer overwhelming financial and reputational harm. They go on to talk about the applicable law that is referenced here, and then talk about their demands. They say that the above referenced false, defamatory, malicious, disparaging and inflammatory statements were published to deliberately denigrate President Trump. They complain about the timing of the fabricated documentary. They say the BBC's reckless disregard for the truth underscores the actual malice behind the decision to publish the wrongful content, given the plain falsity of the statements. And here we go on to demands. President Trump hereby demands that you, one, immediately issue a full and fair retraction of the documentary and any or all other false, defamatory, disparaging, misleading and inflammatory statements about President Trump in as conspicuous a matter as they were originally published. Immediately issue an apology. Well, an apology has certainly been released by the BBC today to MPs, and also appropriately compensate President Trump for the harm caused. And we're just waiting to see whether or not there is an actual sum of how much they want an appropriate compensation to President Trump. And that sum is, I can't see it, but I'm being told it is no less than $1 billion in damages. There it is, right at the end of the letter. If the BBC does not comply with the above by November the 14th at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, President Trump will be left with no alternative but to enforce his legal and equitable rights, which include filing by legal action for no less than $1 billion in damages. It goes on to say rather ominously, the BBC is on notice. The BBC being told it has to issue a full and fair retraction of the documentary, immediately issue an apology and appropriately compensate President Trump, or he will sue them to the tune of $1 billion. Well, the BBC has said it is pausing to decide its response to the letter. Let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, who is in Washington. President Trump is known for being particularly litigious, isn't he, James? This is a zinger of a letter.
Zinger would be the word, yeah. It hardly gets more serious for the BBC in terms of the finances, the legal action and the BBC's credibility. Frankly, we've spoken to a legal source close to Donald Trump's team. They're telling us the BBC defamed President Trump by intentionally and deceitfully editing its documentary in order to try to interfere in the presidential election. The accusation could hardly be more serious. President Trump, this source is telling us, will continue to hold accountable those who traffic in lies, deception and fake news. So that's what they're saying. That's what they would propose to say in court should the BBC not meet the president's demands. And as you have just articulated, we're talking about $1 billion, which has to be a concern to the BBC, a concern to the licence payer as well. And it goes to the heart of Donald Trump's presidency and his authority as exercised over the media in recent months, Jane. I mean, this is an individual who has threatened legal action on a regular basis and has successfully done so against some of the big American networks. He wields power over the media in a way that no president has in the past, and this clearly is an intention to extend that to a foreign media company, the BBC, which, for many people is seen as a touchstone of integrity and accuracy. And that's a view certainly shared on this side of the Atlantic. You get that from many people who tell us that they watch foreign media, they watch Sky News, they watch the BBC, because all they get in the United States is polarised media. So very serious indeed in terms of the BBC's reputation internationally, but more than that, important in terms of how this Trump presidency is covered. For a mistake to have been made on this, it does place in the minds of the American viewer a percentage doubt, I think, about coverage that they read. Bear in mind that Donald Trump will routinely denigrate and disparage coverage that is negative about him. There will be other negative coverage of Donald Trump in future, and he will point to this episode as an example of how the media are intent on stitching him up. So that perhaps actually is the biggest crime against journalism in all of this, that it undermines the efforts to report accurately the Trump presidency and to report on it with authority.
And James, how much traction is this story getting in America? I mean, you're saying obviously a lot of people in America do access their news from international and UK sources, but this row between Trump and the BBC, is it cutting through?
Yes, but not to. It's not the top story, I might say, Jane. Right now in the States, it's all about the shutdown, which looks like it is being resolved. We have the Syrian meeting with Donald Trump at the White House this morning. There are bigger stories in terms of the coverage that it's being afforded. So I wouldn't say it's the media are necessarily running around with their hair on fire about it on this side of the Atlantic. But it is very important. It's certainly a story that the White House is punting for all it's worth. I mean, you've had that from Donald Trump's lawyers. We've seen Donald Trump on Truth Social last night bashing the BBC. Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, putting on X that her visits to the United Kingdom are ruined by BBC's news coverage every time she tunes into it. So they are giving it as much traction as they possibly can, Jane, because it works for the White House in terms of the way they view news coverage and the importance of spinning news coverage to suit them and their agenda. I mean, politically, they're not necessarily alone in that, but it's good for them. This is an administration that is routinely and continually attacking the media as fake news, particularly when it comes to negative news about Donald Trump. And something interesting happened last night, Jane. There were pardons issued by the president for a number of people, Mark Meadows, his former chief of staff, and so on, people who were being tried and some pled guilty to offences relating to trying to falsify results at the last election. That happened within hours of this BBC story blowing up. For me, it has to be more than coincidence that that took place at that time. You had a Panorama scandal, a BBC scandal about January the 6th and election tampering. And within hours, you had people involved in election tampering, they pled guilty to it, being freed. A situation there where it was the lesser story, so might have gone unnoticed by many people. But critics of those pardons were, I suspect, rather silenced by this business of the BBC running this January the 6th story and, misrepresenting Donald Trump. The White House would have pointed to that story saying, look, never mind the business of pardons for people who were involved in election tampering. The election tampering story is the BBC story, far bigger, far more important. So I think, there is a connection there that does nobody any good.
James, thanks so much. James Matthews there giving us the response to this letter, which we've just received access to in the last few minutes, obtained by our sister station, NBC News. The letter from Donald Trump's legal team to the BBC, warning that he will sue them to the tune of $1 billion, which is around £760 million, if they don't immediately issue a full and fair retraction of the documentary, immediately issue an apology and appropriately compensate President Trump for the harm caused.